The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, thin and unremarkable except for the return address that made my coffee cup pause halfway to my lips. Daniel Crawford, Marcus Crawford's son. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table in my modest Denver townhouse, watching the first snow of the season dust the mountains in the distance, when the mailman dropped it through the slot. The envelope landed on my doormat with a soft thud that somehow felt heavier than it should have. 20 years. That's how long it had been since I'd heard the Crawford name spoken in my presence. 20 years since Marcus Crawford, my business partner, my best friend since college, had systematically destroyed my life and walked away with everything I'd built, including my wife. Before I go any further, let me say this. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, someone you called brother, then you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. If you find something valuable in this story, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Your support means more than you know. I picked up the envelope. Expensive paper, the kind that speaks of money and careful presentation. Inside was a handwritten letter, and the moment I saw the opening line, I knew my carefully constructed piece was about to be tested. Mr. Bradley, you don't know me, but I know what my father did to you. I need your help. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. 20 years ago, they would have. 20 years ago, the mere mention of Marcus Crawford would have sent rage coursing through my veins, hot and poisonous. But time has a way of cooling things, of transforming molten fury into something harder, colder, more patient. I read the letter 3 times. Daniel Crawford was 26 years old. He'd recently joined his father's architectural firm, Crawford and Associates, the firm that used to be Bradley and Crawford before Marcus had cleverly maneuvered me out. The letter was carefully worded, respectful, almost apologetic. He wanted to meet. He had questions about certain projects from the early days of the company. He'd found discrepancies in old files. The last line made something stir in my chest, something I'd thought long dead. I think my father has been lying about a lot of things for a very long time. I sat there as my coffee went cold, as the morning light shifted across my kitchen floor, as memories I'd locked away came flooding back with the force of a dam breaking. That's when it started. Marcus and I were 48, at the peak of our careers. Bradley and Crawford had just landed the Riverside Development contract, a $50 million project that would have set us up for life. We'd worked side by side for 15 years, built the firm from nothing, trusted each other with everything. Linda, my wife of 20 years, was the glue that held our friendship together. She organized the company parties, remembered everyone's birthdays, made sure Marcus and I didn't work ourselves to death. She was beautiful, intelligent, warm. I thought I knew her completely. I was wrong about a lot of things. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. That's not how these things work. It was a slow poison, administered in small doses over months. It started with late-night meetings that Marcus insisted I didn't need to attend. Small decisions made without consulting me. Clients who suddenly preferred to work with Marcus alone. Linda's increasing absences, her vague explanations about visiting her sister, about needing space. I ignored the signs. That's what men like me do. We're so focused on the work, on the next project, on building something lasting, that we miss what's happening right in front of us. The revelation came on a rainy Thursday in November. I'd returned early from a site visit to find Marcus and Linda in what was supposed to be my office, going through my files. They didn't hear me come in. The door was ajar, and I stood in the hallway listening to them plan my destruction with the casual efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. The Riverside contract signatures are all here, Linda was saying. Once we have the revised partnership agreement signed, you'll have controlling interest. Marcus's voice. And Thomas still doesn't suspect anything? He trusts us. Linda laughed, actually laughed. He's so focused on the work, he barely notices I exist anymore. This will be easy. What about after, when he realizes what we've done? By then, we'll have everything transferred. The house is in my name. The joint accounts we can drain before he notices. And legally, with the revised partnership terms, you'll own 75% of the firm. He'll have nothing to fight with. I should have confronted them then. That's what people always say they do. But I didn't. Instead, I backed away silently, walked out of the building, got in my car, and drove. I drove for hours, my mind racing, trying to understand how I'd missed it all. The signs had been there for months. Marcus's insistence that I sign partnership revisions. Just standard updates, Tom. Don't worry about the details. Linda's suggestion that we put the house solely in her name. For tax purposes, honey. My accountant recommended it. I'd signed everything, trusted everything, lost everything. But here's what Marcus and Linda didn't know about me. I'm an architect. I build things. I plan things. I see structures that don't exist yet and make them real. And that night, driving through the Colorado darkness, I started building something new. Not revenge, not yet. Something better. Patience. Over the next 3 months, I played my part perfectly. I acted oblivious, signed what they put in front of me, smiled at their concerned faces when they asked if I was feeling all right. And while I played the fool, I copied documents. I recorded conversations. I built a case, piece by piece, that proved Marcus had been defrauding clients, falsifying project costs, taking kickbacks from contractors. I didn't plan to use it immediately. That would have been too obvious, too easy to defend against. Instead, I documented everything, sealed it in waterproof containers, and stored it in 3 separate locations. Insurance, I called it, evidence that would destroy Marcus Crawford if I ever needed it to. Then I let them win. In January 1996, Linda filed for divorce. By March, I'd been forced out of Bradley and Crawford. My name literally scraped off the building. The settlement was devastating. Linda got the house, most of our savings, and alimony. Marcus got the firm and all our major contracts. I was left with almost nothing. My reputation damaged, my marriage over, my life's work stolen. Friends stopped calling, clients avoided me. The architectural community is small, and Marcus made sure everyone knew his version of events. That I'd been having mental health issues, that I'd mismanaged projects, that my forced exit had been necessary to save the firm. For 2 years, I lived in a studio apartment, took small drafting jobs, kept my head down. People pitied me. Some tried to help. Most just forgot I existed. But here's what they didn't see. I was rebuilding, slowly, carefully, under the radar. I took consulting work with small firms. I invested wisely, modestly. I built a new reputation, a quiet one, as someone reliable, honest, meticulous. By 2000, I had my own consulting practice. By 2005, I was financially stable. By 2010, I was comfortable, even successful, though I kept my success private, my lifestyle modest. And through it all, those sealed documents waited. The evidence that could destroy Marcus Crawford sat patient and ready, and I never forgot. It was there. I watched from a distance as Marcus flourished. Crawford and Associates grew into one of Denver's premier firms. He married Linda in a ceremony that made the society pages. They moved into a mansion in Cherry Hills Village, had a son, Daniel. Marcus became everything I'd lost, and more. And I became invisible. That invisibility was my greatest asset. Now, sitting in my kitchen with Daniel Crawford's letter in my hands, I felt the pieces of a plan I'd been building for 20 years finally beginning to move. I called the number Daniel had provided. He answered on the second ring, his voice young, uncertain. "Mr. Bradley, you got my letter?" "I did." "Will you meet with me? Please, I know I have no right to ask, but—" "Tomorrow," I said. "There's a coffee shop on East Colfax, the Daily Grind. 2 o'clock. I could hear his relief through the phone. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Daniel, before I meet with you, I need to know something. Why now? Why contact me?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I found something in my father's files. Something that doesn't make sense. And when I asked him about it, he lied to me, looked me straight in the eye and lied. That's when I knew I needed to talk to someone who knew him before, someone who could tell me the truth. What did you find? I'd rather show you in person if that's okay. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I hung up and sat staring out at the snow-dusted mountains. Somewhere in Cherry Hills Village, Marcus Crawford was living his successful life, probably unaware that his son had just set in motion the very thing Marcus had escaped for 20 years. Consequences. The daily grind was a small place, deliberately chosen, neutral territory, public but not too crowded, at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. I arrived early, took a corner table where I could see the door, ordered black coffee. Daniel Crawford walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. He had his father's height, his mother's features. He wore a good suit, carried a leather briefcase, moved with the careful confidence of someone trying to appear more certain than he felt. He spotted me immediately, came over, extended his hand. "Mr. Bradley, thank you for meeting me." His handshake was firm. His eyes, I noticed, were direct, honest. Linda's eyes. We sat. He ordered coffee, opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder. "I'm just going to lay this out," he said. 3 months ago, I started working at my father's firm. He'd been asking me to join for years, but I wanted to establish myself independently first. Worked at 3 different firms, built my own reputation, finally felt ready to work with him. I nodded, said nothing. They gave me the old projects to review, sort of a learning exercise, files from the 90s, early 2000s, and I noticed something in the Riverside Development Project. My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. "Go on." The original bid documents show Bradley and Crawford winning the contract, but 6 months into the project, all references to Bradley disappear. It becomes just Crawford and Associates. The change happened in March 1996. That's when I left the partnership. Right. My father said you had a breakdown, that you couldn't handle the pressure, that you walked away. But Mr. Bradley, I've been an architect for 5 years now. I've seen partnership dissolutions before. They don't happen like this. There should be buyout agreements, settlements, legal documentation. I can't find any of it. I took a sip of coffee. What else did you find? He opened the folder. The Riverside project budget increased by 40% after March 1996. But the scope of work didn't change. I cross-referenced the contractor invoices against industry standards. The costs are inflated significantly. Someone was taking money off the top. Your father was taking kickbacks. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's what I think. But it gets worse. I found similar patterns in 3 other major projects from that era. Millions of dollars in overcharges, all funneled through shell companies. He pulled out more documents. These companies are registered to offshore accounts. I traced them as far as I could legally go. They all dead end at holdings my father controls. I spread the documents across the table. They were good work, thorough, methodical. Daniel Crawford had his father's mind for detail, but had apparently inherited something his father lacked, a conscience. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Why not go to the authorities?" "Because he's my father." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Because my mother built her life with him. Because confronting him with this would destroy my family. But I can't ignore it either. I need to know the truth. I need to know what really happened in 1996. This was the moment I'd waited 20 years for. Not to strike, not yet, but to plant seeds that would grow into Marcus Crawford's destruction. "Your father didn't just take the firm from me," I said quietly. "He took my wife, my reputation, and my life's work. And he did it with careful planning and no remorse. I told him everything. Not with anger, but with the cold precision of an architect laying out blueprints. I told him about the affair, about the conspiracy, about how Marcus had systematically positioned himself to take everything while I was too focused on the work to notice." Daniel listened, his face growing paler with each revelation. "But here's what you really need to understand," I continued. Your father didn't just betray me personally. He betrayed his clients, his contractors, and the profession. The evidence you found, that's just the beginning. He's been doing this for 20 years. Do you have proof of everything you're saying? I smiled. It was the first time I'd smiled in this conversation. Daniel, I'm an architect. I document everything. Yes, I have proof. Where can I see it? Not yet. First, I need to know something. What do you want to happen here? Do you want to save your father, protect him, or do you want the truth, regardless of where it leads? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he looked up, his eyes were clear, resolved. I want the truth, and I want to make it right, whatever that means. Even if it means destroying your father's reputation, possibly seeing him face criminal charges. He destroyed your reputation. He stole from clients who trusted him. If I do nothing, I'm complicit. Daniel's voice was steady now. My whole life, he taught me that integrity matters, that our work is our legacy. Turns out he was lying about that too. I reached across the table, closed the folder, pushed it back toward him. Keep investigating. Document everything you find. In 3 months, come back to me with what you've discovered. Then we'll decide what to do next. 3 months? Why wait? Because revenge, real revenge, isn't about striking fast. It's about striking perfectly. Your father built his empire over 20 years. We're going to take 3 months to ensure that when it falls completely. Daniel nodded slowly. He's planning something big, a major development project in the Denver Tech Center. If he gets it, it'll be the biggest contract of his career. Then we have our timeline, I said. Let him celebrate his success. Let him think he's won completely. And then... I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. We parted ways outside the coffee shop. Daniel walked to his car, carrying his folder, his world forever changed. I walked in the opposite direction, toward the storage facility, where I'd kept certain documents sealed and waiting for exactly this moment. That night, I made a phone call to an old friend, someone who'd stayed loyal during the dark years. Thomas Reynolds, a forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud. Tom, he said, his voice warm with recognition, it's been too long. What can I do for you? Remember that favor you said you owed me? Of course. I'm ready to collect. 3 months passed like a carefully orchestrated symphony, each note precisely placed, each movement building toward an inevitable crescendo. Daniel Crawford became my unwitting partner in something he still didn't fully understand. We met weekly, always at different locations, always careful. He brought me documents, financial records, emails he'd quietly copied from his father's files. Each piece added to the mosaic of Marcus Crawford's systematic fraud over 2 decades. Thomas Reynolds worked his magic with the numbers. What Daniel had discovered was just the surface. Tom went deeper, following money trails through shell companies, offshore accounts, and carefully disguised transactions. The picture that emerged was staggering. Marcus Crawford had embezzled over $12 million from clients over 20 years. He'd falsified project costs, taken kickbacks from contractors, and used his firm to launder money through fraudulent architectural fees. The Riverside development project that had started everything, he'd overcharged by $2.3 million alone. This is federal crime territory, Tom told me one evening in his office. Mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion. The statute of limitations has run on some of it, but the recent stuff? He's looking at serious prison time. How recent? I asked. The Denver Tech Center project he's bidding on. I found preliminary documents. He's already planning the same scheme. If he gets that contract and executes it the way he's structured it, that's active fraud. That's prosecutable right now. I smiled. Then we wait for him to get the contract. Tom, this is beyond personal revenge now. This is justice, I said quietly. This is justice, Tom. 20 years late, but justice nonetheless. Daniel was struggling. I could see it in his face each time we met. He was watching his father with new eyes, seeing a stranger wearing a familiar mask. The cognitive dissonance was tearing him apart. He lies so easily, Daniel told me one afternoon in late December. We were sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, snow falling softly around us. I asked him point blank about the Riverside overcharges, showed him the discrepancies. He smiled, put his hand on my shoulder, and told me I was misreading the documents. Said you'd made those errors before you left, that he'd had to clean up your mess. He's had 20 years to perfect his story. My mother believes him, completely. When I tried to talk to her about you, about what really happened, she shut down, said you were a difficult man, that you'd become unreliable, that leaving you was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Daniel's voice cracked. She actually believes she's the victim in this. Linda always needed to be the victim, I said. It's how she justified her choices. Don't waste energy trying to change her mind. Focus on the evidence. The Denver Tech Center announcement is tomorrow. They're selecting the firm. I know. What happens if he gets it? Then we move to the next phase, which is? I looked at him directly. Daniel, once we start this, there's no going back. Your father will go to prison. Your mother will lose everything. Your family name will be destroyed. Are you prepared for that? He stared out at the snow for a long moment. I keep thinking about all the clients he stole from, the contractors he cheated, you who lost everything. If I do nothing, I'm saying that's acceptable. That family loyalty matters more than what's right. He turned to me. I'm prepared. What do I need to do? The Denver Tech Center contract was awarded to Crawford and Associates on January 15th. Marcus held a celebration at his Cherry Hills mansion, invited all of Denver's architectural elite. I wasn't invited, of course. I hadn't been part of that world for 20 years. But Daniel was there, and Daniel had become very good at wearing recording devices. The audio he brought me 3 days later was devastating. Marcus, drunk on champagne and success, boasting to his closest associates about how he'd structured the Denver Tech Center deal, laughing about the creative accounting that would net him an extra $3 million, joking about how the client was too stupid to check the actual costs. And then, the moment that made everything perfect. Just like the Riverside job, that's how I bought my first house, with Thomas Bradley's money. Dumb bastard never even knew what hit him. I played that recording 3 times, sitting alone in my townhouse. His laughter, his casual cruelty, his complete lack of remorse. 20 years I'd waited. 20 years I'd built my case, lived modestly, stayed invisible, and now finally I had everything I needed. Tom, I called Reynolds, it's time. File everything with the FBI and the State Attorney General's office. Full package, all evidence, all documentation. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. What about Daniel? He's going to be caught in the middle of this. Daniel knows. He's been preparing. He's also been quietly securing employment elsewhere, documenting his own innocence, and separating himself from his father's business. And Linda? I was quiet for a moment. Linda made her choices. She'll face the consequences like everyone else. The FBI raided Crawford and Associates on February 3rd. Federal agents, state investigators, forensic accountants. They spent 2 days removing documents, computers, files. The local news covered it extensively. Prominent Denver architect under investigation for fraud. Marcus was arrested on February 5th. The charges were extensive. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. Bail was set at $2 million. He posted it the same day using his mansion as collateral. Daniel called me that night. He knows it was me. He hasn't said it directly, but he knows. My mother won't speak to me. She's calling me a traitor. Where are you staying? Hotel downtown. I can't go back there. Come to my place. I have a guest room. Mr. Bradley, You did the right thing, Daniel. The hard thing, but the right thing. Don't question that now. He arrived an hour later, carrying a single suitcase, looking exhausted and lost. I made coffee. We sat in my living room, and I told him something I'd never told anyone. 20 years ago, when your father took everything from me, I had a choice. I could let it destroy me or I could rebuild. I chose to rebuild, but I also chose to remember, not with anger, but with clarity. I documented everything, preserved every piece of evidence, because I knew that eventually Marcus Crawford would overreach, that his greed would be his undoing. You've been planning this for 20 years? Not planning, preparing. There's a difference. Planning implies I was going to attack. Preparing meant I was ready when the opportunity came. You were that opportunity, Daniel. You and your conscience. I destroyed my family. No, your father destroyed your family 20 years ago. He just hid it well. All you did was reveal the truth. The trial began in September. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Tom Reynolds testified about the financial fraud. Daniel testified about the recordings, about discovering the evidence. Former clients testified about being overcharged. Contractors testified about kickback schemes. I was called to testify on day 4. I walked into that courtroom for the first time in 20 years and saw Marcus sitting at the defense table. He'd aged, of course. He was 68 now, his hair gray, his face lined. But his eyes, when they met mine, still held that arrogance, that certainty that he'd somehow slip free. I took the stand and told my story, calmly, methodically, without emotion. I presented the evidence I'd preserved for 2 decades, showed how the pattern of fraud had started with betraying me and had continued with betraying everyone else. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Marcus's lawyer had no questions. What could he ask? The evidence was irrefutable. Linda was there every day, sitting behind Marcus, her face frozen in denial. She'd aged too, her beauty hardened into something brittle. She never looked at me, not once. The verdict came on October 12th, guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for November. Before sentencing, I did something I'd been debating for months. I wrote a letter to the judge, not asking for leniency, I'd never do that, but providing context, explaining how Marcus Crawford's crimes hadn't just been financial. They'd been personal, relational, spiritual. He'd betrayed trust at every level, and the sentence should reflect that. Marcus Crawford was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims. The mansion in Cherry Hills was sold at auction. Linda, who'd married him knowing what he was, lost everything she'd helped him steal. Daniel and I watched the sentencing together from the gallery. When the judge read the sentence, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Relief. The weight I'd been carrying for 20 years, the weight of betrayal, of injustice, of stolen life, finally lifted. After the sentencing, Daniel and I walked out of the courthouse into a cold November afternoon. News crews were everywhere, but we avoided them, walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench. "What now?" Daniel asked. "Now you live your life. You're a good architect, Daniel. You have integrity. Build a career on that." "And you?" I smiled. "I'm 68 years old. I have a successful consulting practice, enough money to be comfortable, and for the first time in 20 years, I have peace. That's enough." "I still can't believe you waited this long, that you didn't try to destroy him years ago." Revenge taken in anger is hollow, Daniel. Revenge taken with patience, with strategy, with inevitability, that's not revenge at all. That's consequences finally catching up. Before I finish this story, I want to say something to anyone listening who's been betrayed, who's lost everything to someone they trusted. If you're watching this and you've found something valuable in what I've shared, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Stories like this matter because they remind us that justice, real justice, doesn't always come quickly, but it can come. You have a choice when someone destroys your life. You can let it consume you, or you can let it transform you. You can seek immediate revenge and risk becoming what they are, or you can build something better and wait for consequences to find them. I chose patience. I chose preparation. And when the moment came, when Daniel Crawford walked into my life with his questions and his conscience, I was ready. Marcus Crawford didn't fall because I pushed him. He fell because I built a foundation of truth underneath him and then stepped back to watch gravity do its work. That's not revenge. That's architecture. 3 months after the sentencing, I received a letter from Linda. It arrived on a Tuesday, much like Daniel's letter had, but this one came from a modest apartment complex in Aurora, far from the Cherry Hills mansion she'd once called home. She wanted to talk, she said, wanted to explain, wanted forgiveness. I held that letter for a long time, thinking about the young woman I'd married, the life we'd built, the betrayal that had ended it. I thought about the 20 years between then and now, about the man I'd become in her absence. Then I walked to my fireplace, where a small fire burned against the November cold, and I placed the letter on the mantel, unopened, next to a photograph of myself at 48, before everything fell apart. Maybe someday I'd read it, maybe someday I'd respond, but not today. Today I had a consultation call with a young architect in Seattle who needed advice on a difficult project. I had dinner plans with Daniel, who'd become something like the son I never had. I had a life that was mine, built slowly and carefully from ruins, and I had no intention of letting Linda's words disturb that peace. The fire crackled. The afternoon light painted my living room gold, and I realized something profound. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. For 20 years I'd carried the memory of what Marcus and Linda had taken from me, but I'd never let it make me bitter. I'd never let it stop me from building something new. And now, watching Marcus Crawford begin a 15-year prison sentence, watching Linda lose everything she'd stolen, watching Daniel become the kind of architect his father had pretended to be, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. If Marcus hadn't betrayed me, I'd never have learned what I was capable of surviving. I'd never have learned patience, strategy, the quiet power of preparation. I'd never have met Daniel, never have had the chance to mentor someone who actually valued integrity. The best revenge, I realized, isn't destroying your enemy. It's building a life so much better than the one they stole that their victory becomes meaningless. Marcus Crawford took my firm, my wife, my reputation, but he couldn't take who I was. And in the end, that's what mattered. That's what lasted. That's what won. Outside my window, the first snow of winter was beginning to fall on Denver, covering everything in clean white silence. And inside, I sat by my fire, at peace, waiting for nothing, needing nothing, complete. 20 years of patience had taught me something Marcus Crawford never learned. Success isn't measured in money or status or mansions in Cherry Hills. It's measured in being able to sit quietly in your own home with your own conscience and feel genuinely content with the life you've built. I had that. Marcus never would. And that, more than any prison sentence, more than any seized asset, more than any public humiliation, was the revenge I'd spent 20 years building. The quiet, unshakable peace of a life lived with integrity. That's all the revenge I needed.